When our bodies come under attack from a viral infection, they launch a sophisticated defense known as the immune response. Our immune system is designed to recognize the cells that make up our bodies and repel any foreign invaders such as viruses. They do this by using a huge army of defender cells, which consist of different types of white blood cell. We make around 1 billion of them every day in our bone marrow. White blood cells, called macrophages, destroy germs as soon as they detect them. However, if a viral infection begins to take hold, we fight back using a more powerful defense of white cells called T and B lymphocytes. Antibodies are a special protein made by B cells. They bind to a virus to stop it from replicating, and also tag viruses so that other blood cells know how to destroy them. T cells have different roles to play. Some act as guard dogs that raise the alarm when they detect invading viruses. Others kill virus-infected cells directly or help B cells to produce antibodies. Once the virus has been cleared, a small number of these specialist B and T cells persist and retain an accurate memory of the destroyed virus. This means our immune systems are primed to prevent another infection from the same virus without attacking the body's own cells by accident. When the body has been immunized against a disease, the cell's memory T cells will tell the body immediately how to deal with the sickness.
These are the parts of the flower. The petals' bright colors attract pollinators like birds and bees. The female part of the flower consists of the stigma, the style, the ovary, and the ovule. These combined create the pistil. The stigma, a sticky receptacle for pollen, is the starting point of the reproduction process. Then, the pollen is brought through the style to the ovary. Then the pollen and the ovule combine to create an egg. The male parts of the flower, the stamen, consist of the anther and the filament. The anther produces pollen. Within the stem is the phloem, which carries nutrients, and the xylem, which carries water. Plants can reproduce in several ways. First way, seed reproduction, occurs when a male and a female part of a plant combine through fertilization. This creates an embryo inside of a seed. The seed protects the embryo and the food for the embryo. The plant will disperse the seed where it will germinate when the conditions are right. The second way, spore reproduction, occurs in ferns, mosses, liverworts, and green algae. A parent plant sends out spores containing special sets of chromosomes. They do not contain an embryo or food for the embryo. Fertilization of the spores takes place away from the plant, usually in a damp place. Then an embryo is formed and the new plant grows from it. The last way is vegetative reproduction. This propagation is a form of asexual reproduction of a plant. A new root will grow out of a bud of the parent plant. This root will create a carbon copy of the parent plant.
Transpiration on a windy day. The humid air surrounding the plant is carried away and replaced by drier air. The air is not fully saturated with water vapor and will dry out the cells it comes in contact with. The loss of water creates a negative pull, created by osmotic pressure, the force created when there is an imbalance between the amount of water inside the semi-permeable membrane. From the outside, when the plant is dehydrated and there is not enough water in the cells, osmotic pressure will occur, forcing water to move up the leaf through the xylem, and water is transferred from the roots to the leaves through the xylem. On a non-windy day, this process will occur in less intensity or not at all, depending on other conditions the plant is exposed to.
Plants respond to external stimuli in several ways. One way, thigmotropism, involves the directional movement of a plant to grow around or on a surface. Another response is phototropism, when a plant grows towards the light. Both responses are regulated by auxins, a hormone. Auxins alert a plant cell to elongate and grow. In thigmotropism, auxins are produced when cells come in contact with the surface they grow on. The auxins are sent to other cells to alert them to grow on this new surface. In phototropism, auxins alert cells that are not in contact with light to grow towards the sun. Both of these responses aid in a plant's function and growth. The adaptations of the fish. The fish have developed an organ called the lateral line system. This organ can detect electric pulses and vibrations through the water. The organ is able to detect these vibrations through neuromasts, small rod-like structures suspended in a jelly-like substance along the lateral line. These neuromasts pick up on vibrations and signals to the fish, alerting it to abnormalities in the water. The lateral line system is located along the spine of the fish. Another adaptation of the fish is the swim bladder. This lung-like structure will fill with oxygen to increase buoyancy and allow the fish to rise in elevation, or release oxygen to decrease the buoyancy and thus lowering the fish in elevation.
So right here is a homeostasis chart, and it describes the process. So it goes right into feedback, and from feedback it can either go to the target set point or the path of alteration. And if it goes through alteration, then it goes to the diabetes mellitus, and then if it decides to be a target set point, then you either have positive or negative feedback. And negative is found in us humans, and so if it decides to be a negative feedback, then you have stabilization, and an example of that is temperature regulation. And then positive feedback, there's amplification, and an example of that is fruit ripening. Homeostasis is a stable environment. An example is like a hairless cat. It maintains its body temperature. An ectotherm is internal temperatures, which is the same as an external temperature. So an example of that is a snake. Endotherm keeps a constant internal temperature, and the benefits of this is that the metabolism works at the same rate. An example of this is a rat. So us humans use a negative feedback loop to maintain body temperature. So when we're hot, we sweat, and we get goosebumps when we're cold because they tighten the skin. And ethylene is plant hormones in which they communicate through C2 and H4. An example is a fruit ripening on a tree or plant. Apples become ripe at the same time and all together.
Okay, rat digestion starts in the mouth of the rat, with the teeth crushing and tearing the food, which is mostly plant material. Rats do not have saliva, so instead they use peristalses, or muscle contractions in the esophagus, to swallow food. Food then goes to the stomach, where the stomach finishes the physical breakdown with stomach contractions. The stomach also takes care of the chemical breakdown, using stomach acids. Food then moves to the small intestine. Since the small intestine is basically a long tube coiled in the abdominal cavity, the small intestine will then extract the nutrients from the food, with help from the villi and microvilli, which are small structures in the small intestine that help increase the amount of nutrients absorbed. The nutrients is then transported to a large number of menstruae, which are also known as blood vessels that help with the transportation of nutrients. The solution that is left in the small intestine is then transported to the cecum, which is an organ that is at the end of the small intestine. The cecum contains bacteria responsible for the breakdown of cellulose from plant material, since that is what rats mostly eat. And it reabsorbs minerals and water from the future waste. It then travels to the colon, or the large intestine, then has the job of taking out all the remaining water and starts to prepare the solid fecal matter for removal from the body. From there, the solid fecal matter goes into the rectum and comes out the anus, finally.
At Dallas Zoo came to us, we got to see a Eurasian eagle owl, which weighs 3 pounds, and its eyes are actually the same size as a human's, and it can turn its head 280 degrees. Then we saw an American alligator, which is an apex predator with webbed feet and can weigh up to 500 pounds. Then we saw a Virginia opossum with bright white fur, which is an opportunistic omnivore. Then we saw a flamingo, which is pink because the arachnoid proteins in blue-green algae can turn them pink. So the younger flamingos are darker. Then we saw a Tamandua anteater, which has a long 14-inch tongue and uses claws to protect itself. It has thick, coarse fur for protection. Then we saw a sloth, which weighed 30 pounds, had 2 toes, and hung upside down. It even gave birth upside down. Sloths move so slow that they can grow algae. Then we saw a tortoise, which is native to Madagascar, and it was an endangered species hunted for its shell. Its shell was made of keratin, the same stuff that your fingernails are made out of. It can actually hold its breath underwater for up to 4 months. Then we saw an African penguin, which lives in the southern hemisphere. It's black and white and weighs almost 5 pounds. It has a nicotine membrane which goes over its eyes to act as goggles.